A man named Ryland Grace suddenly wakes up alone inside a spacecraft, completely confused and barely able to move after being in a coma for so long. He has no idea where he is or how he ended up there. As he slowly regains consciousness, he discovers that the only other crew members on board are already dead. When he looks outside the ship, the terrifying truth hits him: he's stranded deep in space, far beyond Earth, in an unknown star system. After checking the ship's data, Grace realizes it would take him around 13 years just to make it back home. As fragments of his memory begin returning, Grace remembers his old life as a middle school science teacher. During one of his classes, he explains a mysterious phenomenon called the Petrova line, an infrared trail stretching between the Sun and Venus. Scientists discovered that a strange organism known as astrophage is feeding on the Sun's energy, slowly causing it to dim. If it continues, Earth's temperature will eventually drop to catastrophic levels. Even though the situation sounds terrifying, Grace reassures his students that the smartest scientists in the world are already searching for a solution. Later, Grace recalls being approached by a powerful government official named Eva Stratt. Since the threat to the Sun had become very real, she recruits him to help study samples of astrophage collected by researchers. After several failed experiments, Grace finally makes a breakthrough and realizes astrophage is actually a living cell. Although it dies after being exposed to certain conditions, he discovers something shocking: the organism is made almost entirely of water. As the research continues, scientists uncover that astrophage originates from Venus, surviving off carbon dioxide while absorbing massive amounts of solar energy directly from the Sun. Once Grace presents his findings, Stratt reveals something even bigger. Because astrophage can store unbelievable amounts of energy, it could also become the most powerful fuel source humanity has ever seen. She then introduces him to a secret global operation called Project Hail Mary. Scientists have discovered that stars across the galaxy are being infected and weakened by astrophage, except for one distant star system known as Tau Ceti. Humanity's only hope is to travel there, uncover why that star survived, and find a way to save Earth. The problem is, the mission is one way only, meaning whoever goes is almost certainly never coming back. Back in the present, Ryland Grace says a final goodbye to his fallen crewmates, Yao and Ilyakina, before releasing their bodies into space. Alone once again, he struggles to regain control of the ship as it finally approaches Tau Ceti. For the first time, he sees the mysterious Petrova line up close. But before he can fully process what he's seeing, something unbelievable appears outside his window: a massive alien spacecraft silently floating nearby. The alien ship suddenly launches a strange container toward Grace's vessel. Unsure if it's a threat, he carefully brings it on board and examines it. Inside, he finds a small model that looks like a map of the local star system. The object also reveals where the alien craft came from, a distant star system called 40 Eridani. Realizing this may be humanity's first contact with alien life, Grace cautiously waits for the next move. Soon after, the alien ship creates a tunnel using a nearly indestructible material called xenonite, allowing Grace to safely cross between the two ships in his spacesuit. There, he finally comes face to face with the alien itself, a giant rock-like creature that copies his movements to communicate. The creature even built a tiny figure of Grace holding his hand up in victory after catching the earlier container. Amused by the gesture, Grace gives the alien a nickname, Rocky. Since Rocky's species uses echolocation instead of sight, Grace builds a translator that converts Rocky's sounds into English, allowing them to finally communicate properly. Grace learns that Rocky is the lone survivor of a 23-member alien crew, just like Grace is the only survivor of his own mission. Despite being from completely different worlds, the two quickly realize they share the exact same goal: saving their dying stars. Together, they form an unlikely partnership that could decide the fate of both their civilizations. A flashback then reveals how Eva Stratt introduced Grace to the rest of the Hail Mary crew before launch, including Captain Yao, Engineer Ilyakina, and lead scientist Dr. Martin Dubois. Everyone involved understands the mission is almost certainly a death sentence, and backup crew members are even assigned in case anyone fails training. During preparation, the team witnesses the terrifying power of the ship's astrophage-powered engines, capable of instantly melting massive amounts of metal. Overwhelmed by the reality of the mission, Grace privately admits to Yao that he doesn't think he's brave enough for this kind of sacrifice. But Yao calmly tells him that bravery isn't something people are born with. Sometimes, people just need someone worth being brave for. Back in the present, Ryland Grace welcomes Rocky aboard the Hail Mary as the alien slowly adapts to the ship's atmosphere using a small protective suit. What starts as an awkward first contact soon turns into an unexpected friendship. Grace jokingly refers to Rocky as his new roommate while documenting their daily life together. As they continue researching the astrophage problem, the two work side by side to discover why Tau Ceti remains untouched while other stars across the galaxy are dying. While spending more time together, Grace introduces Rocky to pieces of human culture and life back on Earth. But beneath the jokes and scientific discussions, Grace finally admits something painful: he never really had anyone waiting for him back home. Unlike Rocky, who has a mate and people he deeply cares about, Grace realizes how isolated he always felt. A flashback reveals how disconnected he was from the rest of the crew before launch, since they all had loved ones while he had nobody. Even Eva Stratt notices the tension and tries to lift everyone's spirits by unexpectedly performing Sign of the Times during karaoke night, leaving the crew completely stunned. As Grace and Rocky move closer to the surface of Tau Ceti, Grace finally enters the Petrova line himself. Together, they travel to a nearby planet called Tau Ceti, which they jokingly rename Adrian to match Rocky's nickname. There, Grace discovers the breakthrough humanity has been searching for, a tiny organism that actually feeds on astrophage. The bacteria-like life form, which he names Tamoeba, appears to come from the alien ecosystem living on Adrian. For the first time, there's real hope that both Earth and Rocky's civilization can be saved. But the discovery comes with a painful reality. Grace realizes he may not have enough fuel left to ever make it back to Earth. Without hesitation, Rocky offers to give Grace part of his own astrophage fuel supply, even though it would drastically slow down Rocky's return home and put his own future at risk. The sacrifice hits Grace hard emotionally, and in one of the story's most heartfelt moments, he introduces Rocky to the human concept of a hug. Another flashback reveals the disaster that nearly destroyed the mission before it even began. While Grace and Stratt inspect the Hail Mary spacecraft, a catastrophic explosion erupts after astrophage is mishandled. The blast kills Dr. Dubois along with the backup crew members instantly. With no other qualified scientists left, Stratt pressures Grace to take their place on the mission. Terrified and overwhelmed, Grace insists he isn't capable of handling such an impossible responsibility, but Stratt tells him to think carefully before making his final decision. Back in the present, Grace and Rocky descend above Adrian's atmosphere to collect a live Tamoeba sample, but everything suddenly goes wrong. A dangerous fuel leak erupts on board the Hail Mary, severely damaging the ship. As alarms blare throughout the spacecraft, Grace desperately tries to stabilize the situation, but the chaos throws him violently into the controls and knocks him unconscious. Seeing Grace moments away from death, Rocky removes his own protective suit to save him, even though exposing himself to the environment causes devastating injuries to his body. When Ryland Grace finally regains consciousness, he discovers that Rocky was badly injured while trying to save his life. Refusing to let his friend die, Grace carefully moves Rocky into a controlled environment where the temperature can be adjusted to help him recover. While Rocky heals, Grace continues working non-stop on the Tamoeba, successfully breeding enough of the organism to fight the astrophage threatening both civilizations. When Rocky finally wakes up, the two celebrate together, realizing they may have just found the solution that can save entire worlds. As preparations begin for their journey home, the emotional weight of saying goodbye starts to hit both of them. Over time, their partnership evolved far beyond survival. They became true friends. Even though neither wants to separate, they eventually accept that they must return to their own people. Before leaving, Grace and Rocky openly acknowledge the bond they built together across two completely different species. One final flashback reveals the truth about how Grace ended up on the mission in the first place. After everything that happened, Grace privately tells Eva Stratt that he has decided not to join the Hail Mary mission, despite fully understanding that humanity's survival depends on it. With no other options remaining, Stratt secretly has Grace drugged and placed on board the ship against his will. That moment finally explains why Grace woke up with no memory of ever agreeing to the mission. On the trip back toward Earth, disaster strikes again when the Tomiba begins eating through the xenonite containers holding it. Worse, the organisms also start consuming the astrophage fuel powering the Hail Mary itself. Grace barely manages to contain the situation, but then realizes something horrifying: Rocky's entire ship is made from xenonite. If the Tomiba spreads there, it will destroy the ship completely. And even if Rocky survives that, deadly radiation exposure will eventually kill him anyway. Faced with an impossible decision, Grace realizes he only has enough fuel left for one final choice: return home to Earth, or go back and save Rocky. In the end, he chooses his friend. Before changing course, Grace sends unmanned probes filled with Tomiba toward Earth, giving humanity a chance to survive, and then turns the ship around to rescue Rocky one last time. The Tomiba probes eventually arrive safely on Earth, where Stratt reviews Grace's recorded mission logs and learns what truly happened out in space. Meanwhile, Grace and Rocky successfully make it back to Rocky's home planet, Arid. The Iridians even build a massive biodome where Grace can safely live among them. Surprisingly, Grace finds himself becoming a teacher once again, educating young Iridian children just like he did back on Earth. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the science or the space adventure, it's the friendship between Grace and Rocky. Two completely different beings from opposite sides of the universe risk everything for each other, proving that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about choosing to care for someone even when it costs you everything.